Welcome to story time. Let's do our hello song. Do it with me. You ready? Hello, friends. Hello, friends. Hello, friends. It's time to say hello. Hello to all of my friends and welcome to another edition of Story Time. We are going to do our calendar first while we wait for all of our friends to join us. So it is August. The month is August. The day is Wednesday. And then if we look down Wednesday to our next heart, look at that. A 1 and a 9 makes a 19. So today's date is Wednesday, August 19th. There is our heart for today's story time. There is our heart for tomorrow's science time. And if you want to experiment along with Miss Abby, I know, let's get the list. This is what you are going to need for science time tomorrow. Some white coffee filters, some washable markers, and some water. That's it. Sounds like a fun time. All right, so yes, that's science time. Oh, tomorrow afternoon there is also a dance party with Doc Possum. If you would like to join in, go on the library's calendar and you can look under tomorrow and there will be a registration so I can send you the link. Friday, there is a movie under the stars in Lindley. We're showing the movie Abominable. Oh, and there's our Homeschool 101 class on Monday, and then our story times next week, and then there is another movie under the stars in the Corning Credit Union parking lot. You do have to register for all of those programs. And look, we only have next week of August and then another new month. Wow, August went by so fast. All right, so let's sing our day of the week song. Do you remember how many days there are in a week? Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There are 7 days in a week. There are 7 days. There are 7 days. There are 7 days in a week. There are 7 days. There are 7 days. There are 7 days in a week. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Yes, 7 days make up 1 week. All right, so let me put our calendar over here and let me get our weather chart. So here is our weather chart. If you didn't join us yesterday, remember, brand new weather chart or a weather graph. We had a sunny day yesterday. Go look out your window or out your front door and check the weather at your house while I sing the weather song. You ready? What's the weather? What's the weather? What's the weather out today? What's the weather? What's the weather? What's the weather out today? All right, come back, come back, come back. What is the weather at your house today? The weather at my house? I'm looking up at the sky. I see a beautiful blue sky with some of those white fluffy clouds up there. The sun is shining. It is a sunny day. So I'm going to color in that rectangle right there on sunny. Oh, look at that. A nice, beautiful sunny day. It is not going to be too hot today. I personally think today is going to be a perfect day. Not too hot, not too cold, sunny. Ah, beautiful, beautiful. All right, so I have some stories today. They're special stories. They are called fables. Now you might ask, Miss Sue, what's a fable? I'm glad you asked that. I'm going to tell you what a fable is. A fable is a short story where we learn something. There's a lesson at the end of the story. So, the first story is called You Read to Know, You Read to Grow. And it takes place in the land of giants. Now close your eyes and picture this. A land inhabited by giants. Oh, do you have that picture in your head? Good. So picture all kinds of giants living in this town. Well, there was one giant, not too big. In fact, for a giant, he was very, very small. Well, that giant's name, he had a very long name. His name was Peter, Elmer, Ebenezer, William, Egbert, Ed. A very long name, even for a giant. But now the rest of the giants, they did not call him Peter, Elmer, Ebenezer, William, Egbert, Ed. No, they did not. They didn't call him Peter. They didn't call him Pete. They didn't even call him Petey. No. You see, because Peter, Elmer, Ebenezer, William, Egbert, Ed was such a small giant, the rest of the giants, they were a little mean to him. They picked on him all the time. And instead of calling him by his real name, they called him by his initials. If you look down, his initials spell Pee-wee. And that's what the rest of the giants called him. They ran around picking on him, saying, Pee-wee, Pee-wee, you're smaller than a bee's knee. Oh, yes, the regular-sized giants, they were not at all nice to Peter. Well, one day, Peter, he got tired of all of that teasing. So he went to see the wise giant. Now, the wise giant lived on a mountain not too far away. Now, Peter, he walked all the way to that wise giant's house. And when he walked in, the wise giant looked at him and said, well, Peter, what brings you to my house today? Well, now Peter looked at that wise giant, and he said, I am tired of the rest of the giants picking on me because I am so small. I want to grow big and strong. Well, guess what? That wise giant looked at Peter and then pointed to a room in his house that was full of books. And that wise giant looked at Peter and he said, well, Peter, you read to know, you read to grow. The answer's in a book. So now Peter, he walked in to that book-filled room, and he found himself a book. It was called Grow Mighty Muscles in a Dozen Days. Now, Peter, he took that book and he read it. He read it cover to cover, and then he reread it. He did everything that book said to do. Oh, he lifted weights to grow those muscles. He got lots of exercise. He got lots of rest. And Peter, he did grow very strong. But he did not grow any taller. So, the rest of the giants, they still picked on him. Pee-wee, Pee-wee, you're smaller than a bee's knee. So, Peter went back to the wise giant's house. And again, the wise giant said to him, Peter, what brings you to my house today? And Peter again said, I want to grow big and strong. And again, that wise giant pointed to that book-filled room of his and said, Peter, you read to know, you read to grow. The answer's in a book. So, Peter again walked into that book-filled room and he picked out another book. Now this time, the book was called Grow Yourself Tall. And Peter read that book. He read it and he reread it. Oh, he did everything that book said to do. He ate lots of fruit. He ate lots of vegetables. He was very, very healthy. He drank lots of water, drank lots of milk, and he did grow. But he still did not grow to be giant-sized. So again, the rest of the giants picked on him. Pee-wee, Pee-wee, you're smaller than a bee's knee. Well, I tell you, Peter was not discouraged. He got a little down, but he was not discouraged. He went back to that wise giant's house, and he sat down and he started to read every single book that was in that room. Peter, he read books. Ooh, he read gardening books. How to grow absolutely anything. He read more books. He read all the dinosaur books in that library. He read all the books about the stars and the sky and the universe. He read them all. And when he got done with those books, he read all the animal books. Every single animal book that was in that library, Peter read it. And when he got done with the animal books, he read books about how to build things. And when he got done with those, he read the books about how to fix things. And when he got done with those books, more gardening books. And then he read the poetry books. And after the poetry books, he read all the games, all the books about different kinds of games. And then he read the joke books. Yes, Peter read every single book that was in that library. And then, oh my goodness, guess what happened? Every time the other giants needed something, say they were bored, they turned to Peter and said, "Hey, Pee-wee, do you have any ideas of games we could play?" And Peter knew he could always find games for those giants to play. If they were down and having a bad day, Peter always had a joke right there he could tell and brighten up their day. When his neighbor's roof was leaking, guess what? Because Peter had read those books about how to fix things, Peter knew exactly how to fix that roof. When another one of his neighbors, his precious cat got sick, but because Peter had read all those animal books, Peter knew exactly what to do to make his neighbor's cat better. Oh, yes, Peter, he was so smart. Now, after years and years and years, the king of the giants got very old and he died. So the giants, they needed to pick a new king. Well, guess who they turned to? They turned to Peter. And they said, "Peter, will you please be our king?" And Peter, he looked at them and said, "I don't know if I really want to be your king." But the rest of the giants said, "But Peter, you are so smart. We respect you because you know so many things about so much. Please, will you please be our King Peter, Elmer, Ebenezer, William, Egbert, Ed?" And Peter looked at them and said, "No, I don't want to be King Peter, Elmer, Ebenezer, William, Egbert, Ed." "Okay, well then will you please be our King Peter?" "No, I don't want to be King Peter either." And they said, "But Peter, please, will you be our king?" And Peter said, "I will be your king on one condition, that you call me King Pee-wee." And that is how Peter, Elmer, Ebenezer, William, Egbert, Ed became King Pee-wee, king of the giants. Oh, and the lesson in that story is, don't let anybody tell you and get you down. You be who you are. Be the best you can be. And that is all right. What a great story. And it is called You Read to Know, You Read to Grow. Oh, and now the next fable I have for you. This is also a really cool story. It's very old story, and it's got a couple of different titles. Sometimes the book is called It's Too Noisy, and sometimes the book is called It Could Always Be Worse. Well, I'm going to mix a couple those two versions of the story for my own story. Now, once upon a time, there was a house. It wasn't a really big house, but it wasn't a super small house either. And in that house, there lived a family. Now, there was a grandma, a grandpa, a mom, a dad, a few kids, a baby. There was a dog. There was a cat. Now, as you might think, a big house, not really a small house, not really a big house, but sometimes that house felt really, really small. And one day, the dad sat there, and he just said, "Oh my goodness, this house, it is so noisy." You see, the mom and the grandma, with so many people in the house, they were always cooking or washing dishes, and so there were always pots and pans going clang, 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 clang. Loud. That grandpa, he liked to sit in his chair, and grandpa, he liked to take naps. And of course, he snored. Grandpa was pretty loud. And of course, the kids were always arguing over something. "She looked at me, he took my toy." Always arguing. And of course, the baby, as babies do, the baby cried. "Wah, wah, wah." And the cat always wanted attention, so the cat like meow, meow, meow. And the dog too liked to bark at everything. Want that dog. Yeah, so sometimes that house, it was too noisy. So one day, the dad, he had had such a hard day at work. He went to the wise man of the village and he said, "Oh, wise man, tell me what to do. My house, it's too noisy. There's always pots and pans clanging. There's always snoring. There's always kids yelling. There's always the baby crying. The dog, the cat, they're always making so much noise." Well, the wise man looked at Dad and said, "Oh, I can fix your problem. You can fix your problem too. You do as I say. You go home and you move your rooster into the house." The dad looked at the wise man and said, "Move my rooster into the house?" And the wise man said, "Yes, you move your rooster into the house." Okay, so the dad went home. He went out and he brought his rooster into the house. So now, Mom and Grandma, they were still cooking and washing dishes. Bang, 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 bang went those pots and pans. Grandpa still liked to take his naps. The kids would still argue. "She's looking at me. He took my toy." The baby still cried. "Wah, wah." The cat still meow, meow. The dog would still woof, 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 bark at everything. And now there was a rooster that was going. Did that make a quieter house? No, it did not. Dad said, "Oh, it's too noisy." So Dad, he went back to the wise man of the village and he said, "I did exactly as you said. I went home and I brought the rooster in the house, but there's still pots and pans that are banging and banging and banging. Grandpa is still snoring. The kids are still arguing. She took my toy. He's looking at me. The baby is still crying. Wah, wah. The dog, the cat, the rooster, oh my goodness, they're making so much noise. It's too noisy." Well, now the wise man looked at Dad and said, "I know how to fix your problem. You do as I say. You go home. You bring your sheep into the house." "What? Bring my sheep into the house?" So he went home and he brought a sheep into the house. Oh my goodness, do you think that made a quiet house? Of course not. Mom and Grandma, they were still banging those dishes around. Grandpa was still snoring. The kids were still arguing. The baby was still crying. The dog was still barking. The cat was still meowing. The rooster was still crowing. And now, the sheep. Bah, bah, bah. my goodness, it is too noisy. So the dad went back to the wise man of the village, and he said, I did as you said. I went home, I brought the sheep into the house, but my house, it's louder than ever. It's just too noisy. I can fix that, said the wise man. You do exactly as I say. Go home and bring your pig into the house. Bring my pig into the house? Yes, said the wise man. Go home and bring your pig into the house. All right, I don't know how that's going to help, but that's what he did. He went home and he took his pig into the house. Do you think that made for a quiet house? Of course not. Mom and Grandma, they were still cooking and washing dishes. Bang, 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 bang went those pots and pans. Grandpa was still snoring. The kids were still arguing over toys and looking at each other. Oh my goodness. The baby was still crying. Wah, wah. The cat, meow, meow. The dog, woof, 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 woof. The rooster, arr, 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 arr. The sheep, bah, bah, bah. And now the pig sang, oink, 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 oink. It is too noisy, said Dad. So Dad, he went back to the wise man again, and he said, I did exactly as you told me to do, but my house, it is still too noisy. Okay, said the wise man, I think I know. Go home and bring your cow into the house. Bring my cow into the house? Oh, I don't know how this is going to make a quiet house, said Dad. You go home and move your cow into the house, said the wise man. Okay, said Dad. So Dad went home and moved the cow into the house. Now, do you think that made for a quiet house? I don't think so either, because Mom and Grandma, they were still cooking and washing dishes. Those pots and pans were going bang, 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 bang. Grandpa was still snoring. The kids were still arguing. The baby was still, wah, wah. The cat, meow, meow. The dog, woof, 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 woof. The rooster, arr, 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 arr. The sheep, bah, bah, bah. The pig, oink, oink, oink. And now the cow going, moo, moo. It is too noisy, said Dad. Dad said, okay, I'm going to go see the wise man of the village one more time. So he did. He looked at the wise man and said, wise man, I came to you telling you my house was too noisy. I did exactly as you said. I brought in the rooster, the sheep, the pig, the cow. But my house, it is even noisier than it was before. The wise man said, I can solve this problem for you. You go home and you put your rooster and your sheep and your pig and your cow back in the barn. Okay, said the dad. So Dad got home. He put the cow back in the barn. He put the pig back in the barn. He put the sheep back in the barn. He put the rooster back in the barn. And then Dad sat down in his chair. Now, as Dad sat there, do you think Dad had a quiet house? Not really. Mom and Grandma, they were still cooking and washing dishes, so there were still pots and pans going bang, 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 bang. Grandpa still sat in his chair sleeping. The kids were still arguing over toys and looking at each other. The baby still cried, wah, wah. The cat still, meow, meow. The dog still, woof, woof, woof. But as Dad sat there, Dad said, you know, it is still noisy, but it could always be worse. Oh, yeah, so that is kind of the combination of it's too noisy and it could always be worse. And the moral or the lesson in that story, is no matter how bad you think you have it, it could always be worse. Oh, thanks for coming to Storytime today, guys. I hope you liked my fables. Now, before you go, make sure you have your grown-up put in the comment section how many of you are watching. Do you see how noisy it is around my house? I got those roosters and those chickens always. All right, so have them put in the comment section how many of you are watching. Remember, if it's 3 kids and 1 grown-up, that makes 4. And then sing along with me. Are you ready? Here we go. Goodbye.